And now I'd like to introduce Dennis Road. I know I pronounced it wrong. Right. Close.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming out today. I'll keep this very short. I thought I'd do a quick little background sketch on Robert Gould Shaw, who this fort's built after. I wanted to introduce my compatriot over here. We got First Sergeant Roger Olson from the Fort Buford 6th Infantry. We were on the confluence of Missouri and Yellowstone River in the Dakotas, and I'm Sergeant Dennis Board. And we got involved with Sue Williams and the association here, and I was here in October last year and did a little presentation and invited back, and I'm so happy I could be here, and I'm just amazed what they've done since June until now. It's absolutely marvelous. And then to see all the people out here today supporting this. This is a real neat place, and but it's named after Robert Gould Shaw. He was born October 10th, 1837, and he died July 18th, 1863. He was 25 years old. He died at Morris Island. It's about a 1,000-acre island in near Charleston, South Carolina. His parents were Francis George Shaw. His mother's maiden name was Sarah Blake Stung. He had two sisters, Anna Shaw and Susanna Shaw. He later married in 1862 before he was killed in 1863 to Anna Keelan Haggerty. Robert Gould Shaw took part in the Battle of Antietam, the Battle of Gimball's Landing, and the Second Battle of Fort Wagner. He had several people. His mom and dad were very wealthy people, and he came from the Boston Commons. So when he entered the service, he entered as a private. He didn't want to. He could have got an appointment right away as the second lieutenant, but he didn't want that. He wanted to start from the bottom and work up. But his folks were abolitionists very strongly, and he was somewhat. But he thought, along with a lot of other people, even the North, that the Negro person was less than what the white man was. Well, in 1863, the governor, Andrews of Massachusetts, and finally they convinced the Secretary of War, Stanton, that they should form up some black regiments. And Frederick Douglass, who was a free black man, actually visited with Abraham Lincoln, stating that the black man, he can fight, he can win this war. And so they went to Robert Gould Shaw and wanted him to be the colonel, and he thought it over, and some of the sergeant or officers in the corps he was at, they thought it would probably be a terrible thing to want to do that. So he sent a letter to the governor of Massachusetts stating that, no, I don't want to take this commission. And after he sent it, a day or so later, and I don't know if he had pressure from his mom or dad through telegraph, that he should do this. And so he wrote a telegram to the governor of Massachusetts saying that he would take on being the colonel of the 54th Massachusetts. This fort here was first called Camp Reynolds, and it was changed in July 4th, 1867 to be the post Fort Shaw. It was started in 1867 under the command of Major William Clinton with 5 companies of 13th Infantry, 5 officers, and 310 enlisted men. But when they were down at Morris Island, they were pulling these other white units in to fight at Fort Wagner, and he was disgusted that they weren't pulling his regiment. He wanted to prove that his soldiers were capable of fighting just like the white man. In fact, when his men enlisted, they were going to get paid less than the white soldier. The private made $13 a month, and they're going to give his soldiers $10 or $11 a month. So what he did, he actually went on strike, and his soldiers, and it went all the way to the Department of War, Stanton, and his boys got $13 a month also. They were issued the British Enfield, which was imported from England, and when they got into Morris Island or offshore, they were going to take their weapons away from them and give them to some other units. And he put a stop to that, saying, no, my boys got this British Enfield, a 2-band percussion rifle, .577 diameter bullet, we're going to keep him. And so the day of the battle, he was in front of his soldiers, leading with his sword, charging. And of his soldiers, he had a 50% loss of men. Of course, he was killed. They said several bullets struck him in the breast, and he fell down a ditch to the parapet up to the fort. So anyway, after the battle, they retreated, and the Confederates went down and they stripped the bodies of anything of value, guns, cartridge boxes, pocket watches, and they rolled all the bodies into a ditch and covered it up. Well, some of the Union officers said, we wanted the officer, Colonel Shaw, brought back so they could ship his body back to Boston. And of course, the Confederate, the South, thought that the Negro was a slave, and for a white officer to command Negro soldiers was way below their dignity. So they just buried him along in a trench and covered it up. So after the war, they wanted to go in there and disinter the bodies and find his body and bring it back to Boston. Well, his mom and dad said, no, he belongs to the soldiers. Let him remain with the soldiers. But after the Civil War in 1867, they went in and disinterred all these bones of bodies of the black, and one of them was probably Robert Gould Shaw, the colonel, and they're buried at Beaumont National Cemetery in South Carolina. And they, and that's where this massive bones are buried. And the soldiers are all the markers say unknown, unknown, unknown. In 1890s, Augustus St. Gaudens did a casting of the 54th Massachusetts, and Robert Gould Shaw's parents saw it, and they didn't like it. And the reason why they didn't like it is because they show Robert Shaw on a horse with his sword out and his soldiers alongside of him, and they said no, he would have been walking with his soldiers. And so they finally agreed, and if you ever go to the Boston Commons in Massachusetts, you will see it was dedicated in 1897. So that's a little bit of a background on Robert Gould Shaw, who this fort is built after, and I think it's wise that we remember his name. Thank you.